Welcome to That Sinks. My name is Dennis. In this video, I'll teach you how to record and play back a macro. Let's get started. Why do we use macros? We use macros to automate repetitive tasks. I don't know about you, but quite frequently I find myself repeating tasks. For example, I might receive data each month that I'm supposed to format and email to my colleagues. To be honest, this is not really what I want to be doing with my life. Tasks like this can be tedious. There can be a lot of steps involved, and I want the report to look identical every month. In addition, I want to be done with it as quickly as possible. That's why macros are awesome. A macro is a set of instructions that tells Excel to do things for you. Once you get a macro working correctly, you can run it over and over, saving time and preventing errors. Why record a macro? There are two ways to create macros. You can create them by either recording your macros or writing VBA code. VBA stands for Visual Basic for Applications. That's the programming language built right into Excel. We don't know enough about VBA yet to be able to write a macro from scratch, so we're going to use the built-in macro recorder. The macro recorder helps us create macros without writing any code. I'm starting with a workbook that has 3 tabs of unformatted data. Each month I get a report like this and I'm supposed to format it and send it off to my colleagues. I've included 3 months worth of data here so I can demonstrate the repetitive nature of this task. My Patreon supporters can download my project files for this and every other project I create. If you find this tutorial useful and you'd like to have access to my project files, please consider supporting me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below. To record a macro, we use the Record Macro command on the Developer tab. If the Developer tab is not visible, click File, Options, Customize Ribbon, put a check next to Developer, and then click OK. Now click the Developer tab. The Record Macro button begins the macro recording process. When you click it, the Record Macro dialog box is presented. There are 4 parts to this dialog. Let me walk you through these. Macro name. Excel suggests a default name, but you should always give your macros a descriptive name. Macro names must be unique. The first character must always be a letter. Then you can use letters, numbers, and underscores. You cannot use spaces. You can assign a shortcut key to run the macro. This is completely optional. You don't have to assign a shortcut key. But to give the macro a shortcut key, just type a letter in the box. Beware though, most shortcut keys from Control-A to Control-Z are already used by Excel. For example, Excel uses Control-A for Select All. If you use Control-A as the shortcut key for your macro, you lose the ability to select all in your spreadsheet using Control-A. For that reason, I recommend you always use capital letters for your shortcut keys. Just press Shift when you type the letter in the box. Store macro in. This specifies where you want to save your macro. Most of the time you'll use this workbook, especially if the macro is specific to what you're doing inside the current workbook. It doesn't really apply to any of your other workbooks. When you choose this option, the macro is saved inside the current workbook, and you can only use it when you have this workbook open. But if you create a general purpose macro that can be used across a lot of different workbooks, you'd want to save it in your personal macro workbook. When you select this option, Excel creates a hidden workbook that is open when Excel is open, allowing you to use the macro at any time. Description. This is another optional field, but I recommend you use it. Use this field to describe what your macro does and how to use it. It really comes in handy if you have a lot of different macros that you've recorded. Okay, let's record a macro. I'm going to call this one Format Report. I'm going to give it a shortcut key of Control-Shift-Q. In the shortcut dialog, I'm just going to press and hold Shift while I press Q. I'm going to store it in this workbook. and I'm going to give it a description of format monthly report. When I click OK, not much happens, but Excel has slipped into record mode. Notice the record macro button has become stop recording. Excel is now recording my every action until I click stop recording, and then it'll save my actions as VBA code. Later I can play back my macro by pressing the shortcut key, in this case Control-Shift-Q. Let me show you how I want this report formatted. I'm going to format the numbers. I'm going to set the column widths for the regions to 12. I'm going to set column B to 40. I'm going to bold some of these lines. I'm going to indent a few. I'm going to bold and left align the region labels. I'm going to merge and center the region label. I'm going to make that bold and change the font size to 14. I'm going to apply some borders. I want to alternate the row color. And finally, I'm going to turn off the grid lines. Okay, my report is formatted just the way I want it. So now what I'm going to do is stop the recording. I'm going to click on the Developer tab and click Stop Recording. Now we can wait 30 days so that we can format February. I'm just kidding. We'll go ahead and do that now. Let's click on the February tab. Now I get to do all that work all over again. Luckily though, I clicked record macro before I did all that work. So now if I run the macro, Excel will format this report for me. To run a macro, we need to open the macro dialog box, click macros, or you can see here we can press Alt F8. The macros dialog box shows you a list of all the macros that you have saved. In this case, there's only one, Format Report. The buttons on the right side of the dialog allow you to work with the macros in the list. Run runs the currently selected macro. Step Into is used to test a macro. It takes you over to the Visual Basic Editor in debug mode. I haven't shown you the Visual Basic Editor yet, so we'll cover this later. Edit opens the Visual Basic Editor so you can edit the source code of a macro. Create is currently disabled. That's because the macro name already exists. If we enter a macro name that doesn't exist, the Create button becomes enabled. Clicking Create opens the Visual Basic Editor so you can enter the source code for a new macro. Delete permanently deletes the macro you have selected. Once a macro is deleted, you can't get it back, so be careful. Options allows you to modify the properties of a macro, such as the shortcut key and the description. Macros In allows you to specify which macros are shown in the list box. And Cancel lets you exit the dialog without doing anything. Notice when we select our macro, the description is shown below. If you have dozens of macros in the list, those descriptions can come in handy. To run the macro, make sure it's selected in the list box, and then click Run. Wow, that was a lot of stuff happening in not much time. It looks identical to January, and all I had to do was click a button. Let's go format March. This time I'm going to press the shortcut key, Ctrl-Shift-Q. That looks great. Now each month I can quickly format my report and get it off to my colleagues, and I'll be on to the next thing. Hopefully this video has taught you how to record macros, illustrated why they're so useful, and shown you how to play them back. If you do have any questions, please leave those in the comments below. I expect questions, so please leave one. I want to thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. I also encourage you to watch the entire playlist, that way everything is covered in order. If you found this tutorial useful, smash that like button and subscribe. I do this for you, so I hope you'll keep watching.